I think a lot of moms secretly believe that momentum means never slowing down, posting constantly, always being visible, always producing, always on. But honestly, I think that mindset is exactly what's burning moms out. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Sustainable CEO Mom Podcast, the show for service-based moms who are done with hustle culture and ready to build profitable businesses that actually fit their lives. I'm Jenny Sunnison, business strategist, podcast mentor, and the founder of Moms Make Money Collective. Let's build something sustainable. Hey, and welcome back to the Sustainable CEO Mom Podcast, the podcast for service-based mom entrepreneurs who want to build profitable businesses that actually support their life instead of consuming it. Around here, we talk about sustainable growth, realistic business strategy, systems that save your sanity, and what it actually looks like to build a business in the margins of motherhood. So I'm really excited about this episode. So let's just dive right in. So you know what I think one of the biggest lies online entrepreneurship had sold moms? That is that momentum means constantly doing more content, more launches, more output, more visibility, more hustle, more quote unquote being on. And honestly, I think that belief is exactly why so many moms feel like they're constantly starting over in their business. Because the second life gets hard, the second summer hits, the second the kids are sick, the second your nervous system gets overloaded, the second capacity changes, you disappear entirely. And I say that with love because I've totally been there. I think that one of the biggest mindset shifts I've had as both a mom and a CEO is that realizing that momentum is not built during your highest capacity seasons. Momentum is built in the maintenance seasons. It's built in the seasons where you don't have 40 hours a week to work. It's built in the seasons where your routines get disrupted. It's built in the seasons where you cannot operate at full capacity, but you keep moving anyway. And that's what I want to talk about today because I think too many moms are accidentally creating these all or nothing business cycles where they go all in and then they disappear. They go hard and then they vanish. They show up constantly and then completely ghost their audience for months. And then when they come back, they feel like they're rebuilding from scratch every single time. And that is exhausting for your business, for your audience, and honestly, for your nervous system too. Because as someone who has ADHD and whose nervous system absolutely does not thrive in any type of chaos or unpredictability, I've realized something really important. The constant cycle of disappearing and rebuilding creates way more stress than maintaining a small amount of sustainable momentum. And I learned this lesson the hard way after my second maternity leave. Because when I came back from maternity leave, I came back to crickets. Sure, I still had my existing clients. Thankfully, I'd maintained those relationships, but there were no fresh leads in the pipeline. No nurtured audience, no warm conversations happening, and no momentum carrying me forward. And that was honestly quite terrifying because I realized I hadn't actually built a business that could sustain a lower capacity season. I'd built a business that depended on me constantly showing up at full force. And as moms, that's just not sustainable, especially not long term. Because motherhood is full of plenty of interruptions. Sick kids, changes in schedule, summer, life just happening, energy changing, capacity changing, all the things. And if your business completely disappears every time that your capacity shifts, you're going to constantly feel like you're rebuilding from zero. That is not momentum. That is pure survival mode. And I think one of the biggest mistakes moms make is believing that slowing down equals failure. It doesn't. Slowing down is so normal. Needing maintenance seasons is normal. And having lower capacity seasons is also normal. The problem here is not slowing down. The problem here is disappearing entirely every single time that life gets hard. Because visibility doesn't require intensity. Consistency doesn't require daily content. And momentum doesn't require massive output. It requires continued connection. That's it. And I think this is especially important right now heading into summer, or if you're already in summer, because I see so many moms subconsciously preparing to abandon their business for the next 3 months. Not intentionally, but mentally. They're already assuming, well, summer's going to be chaotic, or I won't really be able to work, or I'll just pick things back up in the fall, no worries. But here's the thing that no one talks about. Every time you disappear completely, you don't just pause momentum. You interrupt trust, you interrupt visibility, you interrupt audience nurturing, you interrupt lead flow, and you interrupt sales conversations. And then in the fall, you're not continuing momentum. You're rebuilding it again. And that is what burns moms out. Not maintenance seasons, the constant rebuilding. And that is why I become such a huge believer in what I call minimum viable visibility. meaning what is the minimum amount of visibility required to stay connected to your audience during lower capacity seasons? Not maximum visibility or full force visibility, minimum viable visibility. So MVV. Because sustainable businesses are not built by women who operate at 100% capacity year round. They're built by women who learn how to stay in motion even when life gets messy. For me personally, this looks like planning for interruptions instead of pretending that they're not going to happen, focusing on systems before scaling, choosing maintenance over expansion during these lower capacity seasons, and being strategically visible instead of constantly visible. And honestly, that strategic visibility piece has changed everything for me, because there was a time where I genuinely thought momentum meant constantly creating, with new content, new launches, new offers, new everything. But now I care way more about continuity than intensity. I care about staying connected and maintaining audience trust. And I also care about keeping conversations warm, as well as making sure my business still feels alive even when I'm not operating at full speed. Because here's what I need moms to understand. Your audience does not expect you to be a content machine. They expect you to be a human, especially if your audience consists of other moms. They don't need daily content from you. They don't need constant launches from you, and they don't need perfection from you. They need consistency, connection, and leadership and trust. That is it. And I think sometimes moms overcomplicate momentum because they're measuring momentum by output instead of stability. But stable businesses often look quieter than hustle culture tells us that they should. Sometimes the momentum looks like sending one email per week, repurposing old content, keeping your podcast active, nurturing your audience, maintaining your client experience, keeping your systems running, and showing up imperfectly instead of disappearing completely. That counts. And actually, that matters more than sprinting for 2 weeks and then vanishing for 2 months, because sustainable momentum compounds. And I think that is something we especially have to normalize as moms. We are building businesses inside real lives, inside of school pickup and drop off, inside sick days, inside summer chaos, inside interrupted schedules, and inside nervous systems that sometimes tend to get overwhelmed. And I think the more we fight that reality, the harder that business feels. But the second you stop trying to operate like someone without responsibilities, interruptions, or capacity shifts, then everything changes. You stop building businesses around unrealistic expectations and start building businesses that can actually support your life, which is the entire point. So if you take nothing else away from this episode, let it be this. Momentum is built in maintenance seasons, not because you're doing the most, but because you stop disappearing every time that life got hard. And that shift alone can completely change the trajectory of your business, because the moms who create sustainable businesses are not necessarily the ones doing the most. They're the ones who learn how to stay connected even during these lower capacity seasons. So here's what I want you to do after listening to this episode. I want you to create your own minimum viable visibility plan. I want you to ask yourself this question. What is the minimum amount of visibility I can maintain during busy seasons without disappearing entirely? Maybe that's 1 email a week, 1 podcast episode every other week, 2 threads posts per week, 1 nurture sequence running in the background, and 1 evergreen funnel doing the heavy lifting for you. That all counts. Because momentum is not about constantly accelerating. Sometimes momentum is simply just refusing to start over again. And if this episode hit home for you and you're realizing that you don't actually need more hustle, you just need a more sustainable business foundation, that is exactly the kind of work we do inside of the Sustainable Success Accelerator. We focus on creating a business that actually supports your real life, not one that completely falls apart every time that your capacity changes. Because sustainable success is not built through constant hustle. It is built through systems, strategy, stability, and sustainable momentum. And honestly, that changes everything. All right, that's it for this episode. I'll see you next time. If this episode resonated with you, share it with another service-based mom who's building something real. And when you're ready to move from reactive business ownership to sustainable CEO leadership, your next step is waiting for you. You'll find the right path, whether that's the accelerator, the collective, or a deeper intensive, by going to momsmakemoneycollective.com. You're not just building a business, you're building it your way sustainably, with profit, with margin, and with intention. Because hustle is optional, leadership isn't. I'll see you next week.